It's in the first letter of the Apostle Peter that he wrote these familiar words, chapter 3, verse 15, "But in your hearts set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have." We've been talking a lot about hope. We've been talking about risking hope. We've been looking at examples of people throughout the biblical history, people who risked hope in a variety of circumstances and situations. We've seen through the life of Job, it's possible to risk hope in the midst of great suffering. We've seen through Jeremiah the prophet, it's possible to risk hope when what God asks you to do may seem foolish to the world around you. We've seen through Daniel, through Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that it is possible to risk hope in doing the right thing, even when the outcome is not guaranteed. Even when doing the right thing could get you in serious trouble. It's possible to be true to your faith. It's possible to be true to God, to do what's right no matter what, and to risk hope in doing that. Last week in the story of Esther, we talked about risking hope in order to be the person who brings hope to other people, to be a channel of that hope. Risking hope for the sake of others. In all of these situations, the outcome was not guaranteed. But what was sure, what was solid, was the foundation of their hope. And that foundation was in their knowledge, their trust, their faith in God. My plan is for this to kind of wrap up this short series that we've been in. To wrap it up by kind of reviewing, bringing it back to what is the foundation of our hope. Whatever circumstances we might face, what is it that's really at the center of our hope, the center of our faith? As Peter wrote to Christians in his day, to always be ready to give a reason for the hope that you have. I wonder if you were put on the spot this morning. If I would look out as my gaze passes over each row and I survey this congregation this morning, and my gaze would settle on one of you, and I would call you by name and say, "Come up here for a moment." And I would step aside and I would say to you, can you share with everyone this morning, can you give the reason for the hope that you have? Does that prospect excite you this morning? You say, "Oh, pick me, pick me." You're saying, "I'm not even going to scratch my ear because I'm afraid he's going to think I'm volunteering." Is it an important question? What is the reason for our hope? At its heart, do you have this hope that we've been talking about? Are you able to say, not because your faith is great, but because you know that God is great? Are you able to say, "I trust him no matter what"? No matter what. What is the foundation of our hope? As I was thinking about this and preparing for this time this morning and trying to think, well, how do you summarize that? How do we do that? How do we talk about what is really the foundation of our hope? And of course, those of us who do what I do, sometimes our brain just works in alliteration. That means, you've got to find words that all start with the same letter. And I don't know that God thinks that way, but sometimes he talks to me that way, or so it seems. And as I was forming my thoughts, that they first came together thinking of the person of God, the presence of God, and the promises of God. And I'm not walking away from that. I think that's maybe a good place to kind of lock in a little bit and think, okay, what does that mean? Does that begin to get at the reason for the hope that we have? When we talk about the person of God, we mean who God really is. See, it's not just about conjuring up positive feeling. I mean, you can put faith in all kinds of things, and it can be wise and it can be foolish. One could say that the builders who built their houses, in the story that Jesus told at the close of the Sermon on the Mount that Carol Joyce read for us moments ago, it could be said that both of these men had faith. The one had faith that if he built his house on a rock, that the rock would be a solid foundation when the storms of life came. The one who built on his house on the sand, he also had faith. His faith sounded something like this: it'll be okay. And he may have had really, really strong feelings that it's going to be okay. I don't need to bother building my house on a rock. I'll be fine. And that too is faith, isn't it? Kind of. Did I understand correctly? Someone just whispered blind faith. I didn't actually hear it, Maria. I saw your lips move, but I thought that's what they were saying. Yeah, we talk about blind faith, and sometimes faith in God can feel like blind faith because we don't see God. But you understand the difference. It's not so much about how much faith I have. It's not so much about I got to get more hope, more faith. It's who is it we're trusting in? Is this someone who really can hold us up? Is this someone whose presence with us makes a difference? Is this someone whose promises we can rely on? The foundation of our hope is not just if I be good, everything's going to turn out. Well, for some people, maybe that's it. Like the man with the house on the sand. But God doesn't promise that. He doesn't promise that if we're good, that we won't have problems. He doesn't promise that if we trust in him, we won't have problems. But he still asks us to trust. We go back and think of Job. Job struggled. Job suffered a lot, and he struggled in the midst of that suffering. He struggled to understand what was going on, why this was happening. And he suggested even that maybe God wasn't being fair. He suggested that if he could talk to God face to face, then he thought that he might even be able to win an argument. But when God spoke to Job, did God answer all of his questions? No. Instead, God had a few to ask. And my mind goes back several weeks ago while we were actually away at annual conference, and Brother Sam Butler was here, and this wasn't so much the focus of his message, but ever since I heard his title when he talks about, and I'm not going to get this exactly right, but it was basically how God's questions may provide answers for us. And my mind went to Job when I thought about that and thought about the questions that God asks us and how important those are, and how God was asking Job some important questions. And they started with, where were you when? Where were you, Job, when I laid the foundations of the earth? You think you understand enough to debate with me. You think you understand enough to question what I allow, to question what I do. I've got some questions for you. Where were you? Explain to me, Job, how does this work? How did I do this? And he just goes on and on and on. And it seems like, God, you're just piling on. God, this isn't fair. You're rubbing salt in the wound. You're kicking a man when he's down, or whatever other analogy you want to use. But that's not what God is doing. God is giving Job exactly what he needs in that moment. He needs a bigger view of God. Because ultimately, the hope that will sustain us is hope in the person of God. What we need is the songs that we sang this morning to make them more than songs. To really pray deeply, open the eyes of my heart, Lord. I want to see you. And in all the questions that God asked Job, he was helping Job to see him more clearly. As the unfathomable, invisible, God only wise. And in the process of seeing a little more clearly just how great this gulf is between us and the God who created this universe. To see that he's not just, well, maybe a little smarter than me. The nations of this world are but a drop in the bucket compared to God's wisdom, God's knowledge, God's power. What we need is to be able to see God more clearly, to know him better. That becomes the foundation of our hope. As we get to know the person of God better, we learn that God can be trusted. And we make that choice, and it may just be a tiny little bit of faith, but it's resting in the God who can be trusted. And the more we make that choice, the more we exercise those faith muscles. We choose to trust him again and again in this situation, in that situation, and we come to the point where we say, God, I want to trust you no matter what. God, help me to trust you no matter what. And the more we make that our prayer and the desire of our heart, the more we exercise that faith muscle, and over again we get to the place where we say, God, I can trust you no matter what. God, I will trust you no matter what, by your grace. We look at the presence of God, and we're reminded that we're not alone. Just that fact in and of itself, if we let that sink in, that wherever we go, there God is already. If we believe that, God can be trusted. We are not alone. It begins to make a difference, doesn't it? Doesn't matter so much what the circumstances are, what form of life catastrophe, what form of illness, what form of accident, what form of disappointment. It doesn't matter what form the storm takes as it assails the house. God can be trusted. I am not alone. And then we look at the promises of God. Promises not that there will be no trouble, but promises that lead us even beyond this life to the hope that there is more to life than this life. And we gain that eternal perspective. And when we have that as the foundation of our hope, that God can be trusted. I am not alone. There is more to life than this life. We can risk hope. We can live with that hope. That becomes a solid foundation beneath our feet. It was interesting this week, even as I was looking ahead to our time together this morning. A former classmate of mine in Bible college, pastoring a church down in Texas now, he sent out a message to about 20 or so of some of his friends, acquaintances, including some former professors that we both had. I think there are about 20 of us on this list. And he said, I'm preparing to start a series about the essentials of the Christian faith. He says, now I've only got 5 weeks to do it in. And so he says, I don't want any arguments. I don't want anyone to feel like you have to explain it. Just give me what your 5 topics would be. What you think would be the 5 most important things to talk about the heart of the Christian faith. And it's been kind of fascinating hearing some of these others. Some people I know, not all of them are ones that I know, different ones suggesting as pastors or as Bible college teachers, or in one case, the current Bible college president, what they would suggest about the 5 most important things to reflect the heart of our Christian faith. The very first responder, and I'm not going to go through the whole list, the very first one called our attention all the way back to the Protestant Reformation and to some of the great work that was done in the church and expressing and just thinking through what is the Christian faith all about. And so you had some of the reformers who were really nailing down these things that are at the heart of our faith. I think these would have been in Latin, and I'm not going to pronounce this all exactly correct, but each one of these begin with the word sola. S-O-L-A in Latin. Any idea what that means? Kind of sounds like solo, right? And if you're singing a solo, you are singing alone, okay? So yes, sola means alone or only. And these great tenets of the Christian faith, sola scriptura. Well, what do you think that means? Scripture, or the Bible alone, in terms of the source of our revelation about God. Now, each of these can be a conversation, but this is our authority, the written word, how we come to know and understand God. There are other ways, obviously, the world He created and such, but as a tenet of the Christian faith, sola scriptura, sola Christus, Christ alone. There's no other way. Sola gratia, grace alone. We're not saved by our works. We're saved by God's grace. Once again, look where the focus is. The focus of our faith, the focus of our hope. It's not on our works. It's not on how good we can be. It's recognizing the character of God, recognizing who He is, recognizing His grace, His mercy, His generosity. Okay, we've got 3 of them so far. The Scriptures alone, Christ alone, grace alone. The 4th one is sola fide. You guys are good. Faith alone. That's our part. As Paul wrote in Ephesians, we're saved by grace through faith, not of works. It's not by what we do. It's by believing. It's by trusting. And then the last one, sola gloria, or more fully, gloria Deus, Dei, something like that in there. What do you think that would be? To the glory of God alone. The ultimate purpose in all of it is for God's glory. See, when we reflect on those great truths of the Christian faith, those great tenets, that too can be described as that's at the heart of our faith, and that's the reason for our hope. I didn't dispute any of those. I thought, yeah, it's kind of hard to improve on that great work that was done in that time in history, and just kind of not only nailing some theses to the door of the Wittenberg Castle, but nailing down some, what is it? What is it that defines the Christian faith? I took my thinking in a little different direction and thought, okay, not everybody relates to this kind of propositional truth in that way. Certainly not everyone speaks Latin. And I never did come up with my 5 conclusively, but I came up with 4 that I was working on at least. And maybe we'll come back to these at some point, but somehow I wanted to express some of the same things, but a little differently. And so where my mind started was with these statements. First of all, God is real. God is real. Is that important? Is Christianity just an idea? Is it just a system of values? Is it just a way to live? Is it just good advice? Or is there a personal being? Is there a creator who is real? Who exists? See, that calls us back to Hebrews in chapter 11, that great chapter of faith, where it says, without faith it is impossible to please God, and whoever comes to him must believe that he is. That he is. At the center of our hope is this God who is real, who is. This God who exists. And we could spend a whole series just talking about that. Talking about the evidences in the world around us and in creation. We can talk about what is it for you that just strengthens your faith in a God who is real. I want to share something that Reba brought to my attention a few weeks ago that relates to what Chris brought to our attention a few weeks ago. It's part of this whole Dunkirk story, okay? We've shared about that a couple different times, about just this hopeless situation on the beach there in France. Here's an article. It has a picture attached to it, and I'll describe the picture in a moment. It starts by saying something the movie Dunkirk apparently leaves out. And here's the article. When Britain was close to defeat during the Second World War and the entire British Army was trapped at Dunkirk, in desperation, George VI called for a national day of prayer to be held on the 26th of May in 1940. In a national broadcast, he instructed the people of the UK to turn back to God in a spirit of repentance and plead for divine help. Millions of people across the British Isles flocked into churches praying for deliverance. And this photograph, which you can't see, which I'm looking at here, shows the extraordinary scene outside Westminster Abbey as people were lined up for blocks to get into the church to pray. 2 events immediately followed. Firstly, a violent storm arose over the Dunkirk region, grounding the aircraft, which had been killing thousands on the beaches. Secondly, a great calm, which then descended on the channel, the like of which hadn't been seen for a generation, which allowed hundreds of tiny boats to sail across to rescue the 335,000 soldiers, rather than the estimated 20 to 30,000, which they had originally expected. From then on, people referred to what happened as the miracle of Dunkirk. And Sunday, June 9th, was officially appointed as a day of national thanksgiving. Now, do I have proof that all happened in direct response to the prayers of the people of Great Britain? No. You choose whether to believe that that was related or not. Certainly, those weather patterns were notable, and the people of that time, many of them saw that certainly as a direct answer to their prayers. And certainly we know that there are times when people cry out to God and the answer doesn't come like that. But the question each of us has to settle, whether it's about those events or whether it's about just the world in which we live, the creation around us, is there God? A God who's real? Well, that was my first point, and we're not going to take time to expand on all of these, but not only is God real, but God, the God who is real, reveals himself. He makes himself known. He's not just a God who's distant. He's not just a God who's out there, but he's a God who reveals, a God who makes himself known. He reveals himself in the world he's created. He reveals himself in the Word, the written Word, through the prophets. He reveals himself through the Word, through his Son, Jesus Christ. The writer to Hebrews talks about that God who in times past, in many different ways, spoke through the prophets in diverse manners, diverse times, has in these last days spoken through his Son. God is real, and the God who is real is a God who reveals himself, a God who speaks, a God who makes himself known in the world, in his Word, through his Son, and continuing today through his Spirit. He makes himself known to us on a personal basis. Thirdly, God is a God who redeems. This could be a whole series in and of itself. A God who redeems. We talk about redeeming in a financial transaction, and sometimes that's a helpful way to look at what happened through Christ on the cross. That Christ paid a penalty. There was a transaction, a financial transaction, that God redeemed us from our sin, from the penalty of sin. God paid that for us. And that's part of it, but it's bigger than that even. I don't want to say that's not at the center, but it's bigger than that. God who redeems is a God who can take the slavery of Joseph, sold by his brothers, Joseph's slavery in Egypt, and God can turn that on its head, and God can use that and bring good out of that. God is a God who can take evil and turn it into good. It doesn't justify the evil, but God's so much bigger than all of that. God can take our failures, and out of our failures can build good and can redeem our failures. You understand that use of the term? God is a God who does that. He's a God who redeems. And lastly, God is a God who rewards. It may be in this life, and in many ways it is, but it's not ultimately in this life. The same challenge in Hebrews that says, without faith it is impossible to please God, and whoever comes to him must believe that he is, and that he is the rewarder of those who earnestly seek him. And therein is our hope. A God who is real. A God who reveals himself not just in the world, but reveals himself to individuals who wants a relationship with us. Who revealed himself in his Son. A God who redeems, who redeemed us through his Son, but continues to redeem our failures, our weaknesses. Lets his light shine through the broken places of our lives for his glory, for the good of the world around us. It's a God who rewards. I want to encourage you to dig a little bit deep this week. As you think about where we've been in our journey in risking hope, as you think about what is the reason for the hope that you have. And as we do that together, May God lead us back where he led Job, where he's led so many others, that ultimately we fall on our knees in worship of the God who created us, the God who redeemed us, the God who's revealed himself to us, the God who ultimately will reward our trust in him.